Well, greetings everyone. Thank you for keeping it on CK Sports, your dedicated YouTube channel when it comes to football on the African continent. We are based in Kampala, Uganda, and we talk a lot of football in Uganda, in the East African region, and also on the African continent. On today's show, we will be focusing on 2 or 3 things. One of those is the 2026 FIFA World Cup, together with the Champions League that is at the business end of things. I won't be doing this alone. I am joined by Ismail Dhakaba Kigongo, the head of sports at Nation Media Group. Ismail, good greetings, and how have you been?
Alhamdulillah, I'm very good and glad to be here.
Yes, there are lots of stories that are making rounds on the African continent. With the World Cup under 2 months away, the biggest one of them should be how African teams are preparing for themselves going into the World Cup. We have 10 of them, something that we should be excited about. But one of those 10 decided to sack their manager with 72 days to the World Cup. That is Ghana, when they let go of Otto Addo, a man who had guided them to the World Cup. And the big question was, who will be taking over? Who will be replacing him ahead of the World Cup? What kind of contract will this person be getting just for the World Cup? A 2-year contract, a 4-year contract? And of course, a lot of people had showed interest. And it was the Portuguese Carlos Queiroz who was given a 4-month contract just to see them through the World Cup. If it does well, probably the contract can be longer. But first of all, the decision to let Otto Addo go towards the World Cup, because they thought he didn't give them enough during the international friendlies they played, but also his failure to qualify for the African Cup of Nations. So they thought they would ride on the bid that he qualified for the World Cup, but when the international friendlies came around, he didn't impress against Germany and Austria.
In the end, what did he mean was a lengthy losing streak, because they had lost 5 in a row by the time he walked out or he was sacked from the job. It doesn't appear very good. I remember the day he was sacked, one of the headlines I read was, I think on the BBC, was Ghana sack coach 72 days to kick off of the World Cup. And while it feels so close and should be a point of discussion, I don't think he's the last to be sacked. I think we've seen these stories.
I think they are between now and the World Cup?
Yes, between now and the World Cup. Globally, Clive, you know that before the World Cup, many coaches or players are negotiating what would be their kill of a contract, some kind of bonus. And sometimes when they fail to agree with the FA or the FA presidents, they choose to walk away. And some of these decisions are going to be made very close to the World Cup. So I don't think it's going to be the last. However, I've always also felt Odo or Ado. Sometimes I confuse which A or O comes, because the names are almost interchangeable. Otto Addo has always had a very frosty relationship with the Ghana FA. Remember, while he's Ghanaian by ancestry, he's someone whose football knowledge has mainly been honed by the time he spent in Germany, at Borussia Dortmund and all. And I've read stories in the past where Ghanaian journalists do not feel like he's one of them. They see him as someone who is obscure, very different, and may not necessarily understand the culture of the Ghanaian player coming through from the streets of Accra or Kumasi or Gold Coast or wherever, because he does not belong to that. So they've always questioned him. But also I've also felt that over the years, and this happens across the African continent, many FA's journalists and fans have not really believed that they are going to raise an African coach to the point of coaching the national team and doing well. That's why, for example, Ghana have also had a very good coach in Kwesi Appiah, who they never really gave.
Who always does wonders outside Ghana.
Outside of Ghana, but he's never really had a very good relationship. And this is not to say that Otto Addo does not know a lot about Ghana, because he's played, I think, 15 caps. He played for them on 15 occasions.
Even at the World Cup in 2006, when they made their debut, he was part of that squad.
He was part of that squad, yeah. Of course, being a midfielder, his name could not come out like Stephen Appiah or Mike and all the other bigger players who had bigger profiles, because they're playing at top European clubs. So it does not carry the kind of clout like others do. So in the end, by the time he's sacked, the first thing that came to my mind may not even be just the games he's lost in the friendlies after he delivered the ultimate prize of going to the World Cup. But they've never really bought into him as an individual. So inevitably, he was going to go. The timing is very curious.
Because if you remember, even the previous World Cup in Qatar, he still led them to the World Cup. But towards the World Cup, that's when Chris Hughton came into the picture.
Yeah.
The government and the
former Brighton manager.
Yeah, the government and the FA weren't sure who they wanted.
Yeah.
So the government was insisting on one, the FA was insisting on the other.
Yeah.
So they go to the World Cup with the other acting as technical advisor or technical director.
Yeah.
The World Cup ends, Chris Hughton takes over as head coach. He comes for the Africa Cup of Nations, should have been in Ivory Coast. They failed to get out of their group, and he's let go or resigns as under that.
You wouldn't forget that goal they conceded against who? Was that Equatorial Guinea?
The others group game when they led 2-0 before the game
before
is
they were
ending
knocked
2-2.
out. Yeah, one of those veterans from one of those smaller teams, one of those smaller nations, when they were knocked out, and it's one of the enduring images. I remember some of you who are in Ivory Coast telling a story of the journalists going after the coach.
After the players. They went after the players. The players had dodged the mixed zone session, the mixed zone, so the bus had to come closer. And they had to use a different route to get into the bus.
Even the post-match press conference,
the coach
was also very fiery.
Yeah, the coach showed up, but of course, some of the questions weren't very kind to him. He was calm and stuff like that, but people were bitter.
Yeah.
The press conference is done. We go to the mixed zone, and people are demanding for the players to show up and answer some of the questions why the team had failed,
why the team had performed that poorly. And that's one of the things that, and we are going to talk about Carlos Queiroz at some point. That's one of the things I love about West African journalists and Northern African journalists. We are not the same. In this region, in East Africa, we do not really have this huge attachment as media to the national team. Our national teams
don't have the history or pedigree that theirs do. So they have a right to demand for results. Sometimes you feel...
And they just being fans. Because the Uganda Cranes loses games, the Harambee Stars loses games, or even the Taifa Stars, but we do not have the same kind of
the fun
anger or joy.
The fun in you at that level of the AFCON and the World Cup will always come out. It doesn't matter what you're doing there, a journalist or whoever, the fun in you will come out whether you like it or not. And I wouldn't blame them.
Or it's also because that when we go for these tournaments, we do not even expect
we don't expect much exactly
from the team. We were in Morocco, and by the time the Uganda Cranes were knocked out after losing to Nigeria in that game by 3-1, many of us knew they had been out prior to that, and were not shocked that that's how well they performed, because we also understand the abilities of the team. But sometimes I'm taken aback. I've seen Cameroon journalists also very angry towards their team and their coach. Yeah, you saw the same, I think, the Nigerian journalists also in Morocco going after Eric Chile.
The Moroccans themselves, I mean, a Moroccan journalist asked his coach if he plans to tender in his resignation after Senegal beaten him in the final of the AFCON.
And Queiroz had done very well over his time as Moroccan coach. So it's sometimes a challenge. And I've always felt, even in the case of Ghana, journalists there have always had a very frosty relationship with some of their coaches.
True. And players
and the players. And that leads to some of the reaction. And sometimes because the media is a platform that can drive opinion, they tend to turn the public or the Ghanaian public against particular coaches. And in the end, when someone like Ado is gone, I don't think there's a lot of pity or sympathy. I would imagine the debate that is happening in Ghana now should be about how much they are going to be spending on Carlos Queiroz. Remember, if you go back to 2010, when South Africa did hire Carlos Alberto Pereira to coach, no one was discussing how great a coach he was and how he led,
but how much the government was going to spend on him.
To be paying him. I remember at the time they talk about 250,000 rand.
He was earning more than the president at the time.
Yeah, so
if I remember
that was a debate, and I can imagine the debate in Ghana may not even necessarily be about what Carlos Queiroz has to sort out on the pitch to get the team to a competitive level, but everyone must be discussing how much is going to be spent on Carlos Queiroz and his backroom staff, and maybe if he's asked that is coming into Ghana and is going to be staying at the Serena, maybe
what are the chances that he will even step foot in Ghana, unless if there is an arranged special flag off by the head of state or stuff like that, where the entire team has to be there, the flag is handed over before they go to camp and stuff like that, because you also feel his work is cut out, because just next month on the 22nd and the 22nd of May and the 2nd of June, they have 2 friendlies against Mexico, the other against Wales. I don't think those will be in Ghana. They will probably be somewhere,
the 22nd of May, maybe for players who are not playing the top 5 European leagues, because I've seen most leagues, I think, at the top end on May 24th. So there are players who will not be part of that. And we've seen from what you've stated, we've seen also previous with Avram Grant when he's coached in Zambia.
Also at Ghana.
Even in Ghana, when he's coached there. And he could barely even have an apartment in upscale Accra. I remember people accusing him of living in London while coaching players in Accra and Kumasi. So I would imagine that's going to be the debate. Before, it's going to take a bit of time. By the time we get to discussing what Queiroz can change or do, the time will have run out.
Because I'm told he has actually been given, according to reports, he has been given a target to at least get into the quarterfinals that will guarantee him a longer contract as the head coach of the Black Stars.
Without Mohamed Kudus?
He has others he can rely on. Semenya at Man City has been in fine form, and
I'd rather have both Kudus and Semenya.
Of course, it's a big blow that they won't be having Mohamed Kudus going to the World Cup.
It would be a very big, but maybe the one thing that Carlos Queiroz has a lot of experience. When you think about him at 73, many of us were first introduced to him when he became an assistant coach at Manchester United under Sir Alex Ferguson, and eventually he's had 2 stints, and I got to learn that. Just to emphasize how far back that is 2002 when he first took over as an assistant coach, and eventually returned for a longer spell as an assistant for 4 years. So he has a lot of experience. He's coached at the top level. He's taken Iran to the World Cup before. He's coached Portugal in 2010. He's been
South Africa too. So he has coached an African team at the World Cup.
At the World Cup. He's also coached Colombia, the United Arab Emirates. So he's fairly exposed, and Real Madrid. So in terms of a comparison of how big, because the first thing that comes to mind is
he actually didn't coach in 2002. I think he led them through the qualifiers, because I remember it was like Jomo Sono at the World Cup in 2002 in South Korea and Japan. Must have been Jomo Sono.
You can just confirm that as we go on. But that emphasizes how experienced he is. Because when you're going to a tournament as huge as this, maybe either you need a new coach with very new ideas that many people are sold into, are buying in, or you need someone with the kind of experience like Carlos Queiroz is. And where Ghana is right now, they would rather have Carlos Queiroz or another experienced coach than him. Then the one thing that all of us can remember is teams. There is a time he was being credited for a lot of organization at Manchester United defensively when he was working with Sir Alex Ferguson. And that's what sold Real Madrid into hiring him. Eventually, that did not go down well. He did not perform as well as they had hoped at Real Madrid. Then the other thing you cannot have is a fear of dealing with big egos or big stars and big players. Ghana can have a bit of those. But for someone who has worked at United, has worked at Real Madrid, that cannot be an issue.
Yes, at South Africa, he was sacked, or he left on the 30th of March 2002. That was 3 months before the World Cup. So he didn't coach at the World Cup, but he saw them through the qualifiers.
Yeah, so eventually, you're looking at someone who might know what to do at that stage. But maybe as we get closer to the World Cup, Clive, we will be talking about the kind of form some of these Ghanaian players find themselves in. Because however good a chef he might be, you must give him the right number of eggs for him to make omelette.
Yeah.
And if Ghana do not have the eggs, then we can all talk about the CV and how good Queiroz is. But eventually, when the team walks out in June, then the performances do not match everything that is the reputation of their coach.
Because you look at the stints he had with Iran. Okay, yes, you're coaching Iran. They're not expected to go far. But you thought his teams were organized.
Yeah.
Personally, I thought they were very organized defensively. The Iran team he coached was very hard to break down.
They had one big star, I think, what's his name? He used to play in Germany. Hashimian, Vahid Hashimian, yeah? Their striker, he was their big star. But if Hashimian got them a goal, then they were more likely to win games. and of course, it's easy to say that he would get to the Asian qualifiers very easily.
Yeah,
because Iran is one of the stronger sides on that continent. So it was almost guaranteed. Then you start to judge them with how well they performed at the World Cup. Not too bad, not too good. In the end, he did as good as the omelette, as the eggs was given to make the omelette.
Well, of course, he coached at 5 editions of this competition, played 16 matches, won 4, drew 4, lost 8, conceded 19 goals, and also scored 19 goals in total. Not a very good record, but also when you look at the teams he coached, okay, Portugal is one of those that he took even to the knockout stages, but his World Cup record does not look good.
And even for Portugal, they lost to a team that eventually went on to win the World Cup in 2010, Spain. So when you look at it that way, you're thinking, okay, if you're beaten by a team that emerges as eventual champions, then you haven't performed too poorly. Because it's sometimes when these coaches are hired, the first thing that we, the media, always talk about is how much they know about African football. But today, I don't think you need to live on the African continent to know it. Because there's so many of our good players on the continent playing at the top level in Europe, and then information is readily available.
And that's what I wanted to ask. Does it really matter? I mean, yes, you don't know much about African football, but most of the players you're dealing with spend their football careers in Europe. But also playing competitions like the World Cup and stuff like that. Even the Africa Cup of Nations itself is not a CHAN kind of a tournament or a club, Champions League or Confederation that you'll need to understand a lot more about the African culture for you to be able to get results.
I think you hit the nail in the head. When you need to understand the why you need to understand the African football, you may need to understand it if you're coaching in the CAF Champions League, if you're coaching with Casablanca or Esperance or Vipers or Asante Kotoko or Hearts of Oak. But in the end, when you're coaching a national team, the players that form the base or the foundation of some of these national teams are not necessarily players who are playing in the Champions League. They're largely players who are playing in the top 5 leagues in Europe, and they too are visitors on the continent more often than not. Some do not even have a very consistent heritage or a connection besides their parents having left the African continent or their grandparents, so they choose to come back. So you may not need it that much. And for a coach who has worked at the very top level in world football, I think he would know a thing too about finding information. First of all, it's easy for him to pick the phone and talk to some of the coaches of his clubs and get to understand. If Carlos Queiroz picked the phone and called Pep Guardiola and wants to speak to him about Antoine Semenyo, about the kind of player he is and attitude and his training habits and this kind of thing, the things to do with character, I think Pep Guardiola would not be out of place talking to him. And we're talking about Pep, who is probably the greatest manager that we've seen, or at least the greatest of his generation. So, and there are so many of these is going to call up across Europe, and all of them would be very glad to volunteer information about Ghanaian players. So maybe it no longer matters now like it did when Claude Leroy, for example, first came to the African continent in the late 80s and eventually led that indomitable Lions team to the African title in 1988 in Morocco. It was a lot different then to understand Oman Biyik and Roger Miller and all these other players. Right now, it's not the same.
Well, they're in Group L. Yeah, they have Croatia in there, England together with Panama. Of course, their campaign starts with Panama. Again, I feel they should be able to win. Okay, I've seen them against South Africa twice. That's Panama. And then you have England in there. Their second game, their last game will be against Croatia. You feel it's a tough group for them.
Very tough.
The first game should set the tone of pace for them.
2 of the teams in this group were in the semi-finals of the World Cup that was in Russia in 2018. Eventually, Croatia reached the final and lost to France, and England were knocked out in the semi-final by Croatia. So, in terms of reputation, these are much, much bigger nations. And Croatia, if you go as far back as 98, also made the semi-finals and were only beaten by those 2 Lilian Thuram headers in that semi-final against France. And England, of course, we know England. They will talk, and they are the league that most Africans are exposed to. We know a lot about England than we know about our villages, especially the Premier League. And England will be thinking they should sail through this because it's not the same Croatia that they played in 2018. Luka Modric is now playing at walking pace, still a very good player at AC Milan, but not at the level where he was performing 8 years ago. But Ghana should have an opportunity. After all, in a 48-team World Cup, the top 2 go through, and then you have some of the
8 best third place
teams. And the 8 third place teams will depend on one, you must win a game.
Yeah, at least.
You must win a game to be part of those 8. And
so
then
beat Panama.
You must beat Panama. And then I also have a sneaky feeling that you should not concede many against England and Croatia. If you're Ghana, you do not lose games 5-0 and you think you'll be within, because there are teams that will have steely defenses and lose 1-0 or 2-0, or even concede just 2 goals over the other 2 games, and even perhaps get a draw, an unexpected draw against some of the favorites. So the task for them is very simple. Carlos Queiroz and the side have to work out for that game against Panama and give it to their all. If they do and get the 3 points, then they'll have an opportunity. After that, you get to the round of 32. The draw becomes important. Okay, eventually, if you're finishing third, you're definitely going to meet a team that finished top of their group, of the other groups. And then you start to dream of a round of 16. But we've seen runs at the World Cup, before. Unthinkable. Of course, one of them being Croatia in 98.
Even Ghana in 2010.
Sense, Ghana in 2010. Even in an African sense, I was going to start with Senegal. And 2002. Then 2002. Of course, Cameroon in 1990. The moment they beat Argentina in that opening game of the World Cup in Germany, in Italy in 1990. Then eventually Senegal, then Ghana, then we've seen with Morocco, who even went further than the quarterfinals and got the semi. In the end, for me, in a knockout tournament like the World Cup, you have to work your way into the first knockout game. Once you get there, you never know what might throw. Anything can happen in knockout football.
The target of quarterfinals is the Ghanaian FA asking Carlos Queiroz too much, or they are being realistic?
I think you must set your target amongst the stars and then fall amongst the clouds. They've set a very good target. For me, realistic. Especially when you're an African team that is not going to the World Cup for the first time. It would be too high if this was Cape Verde or one of the other smaller nations that have made it to the World Cup. Let's say Curacao, who made it to the World Cup. But for an African team that has been there before, I think it's realistic. They just have to get into the knockout stages, because then thereafter, what if they lose a round of 32 games deep into extra time against Germany or Spain or France or one of the top nations? Would that be a very bad World Cup? It wouldn't. The same way we talk about 2010. Clearly, on paper at kickoff, Uruguay should wipe the floor with Ghana, because Uruguay are also former champions, and they had one of their best generations of players at the time. Diego Godin was just coming through as a young player, Luis Suarez and all, Edinson Cavani and all the others. At that stage, Ghana had no business competing, but they came very close, and many of us will look back, if Asamoah Gyan converts that penalty, then Ghana into the quarterfinals, and that quarterfinal would have been against USA. So it's not too far-fetched, I think, in knockout football to set your targets at a very lofty level, hoping that once you get to that first knockout game, then you can go as far as possible.
But also you got to love their self-belief and confidence that they can actually be able to go that far in the championship. You're talking about a team that made their World Cup debut in 2006, and they happened to be the only African team then that went out of their groups, because remember they were knocked out by Brazil, if I'm not mistaken, at the round of 16.
Ronaldo
exactly. So then 4 years later, they go all the way up to the quarterfinals. So if they have the self-belief that they should be going that far, I probably just need to watch the space. And there is history for Carlos Queiroz to benchmark on if they are telling him our target should be to get into the quarterfinals.
Yeah, and I really hope that all the things that happen on the pitch are what we'll be discussing, because many African teams look back at Togo in 2006, that incident where they had refused to come out of the hotel
for their last group game.
And FIFA had to intervene. We've also known of a story of money being flown to the Ghanaian players, I think in Brazil in 2014. So hopefully the story will be getting out of the USA, Canada and Mexico will be about what Ghana are doing on the pitch. Because it's not too far to think that the next story will be about bonuses and what has not been paid due to them, for their qualification bonus is not paid, or they have not been paid something before they arrive.
Well, there is already a story making headlines from the Ghanaian media accusing the president of getting involved in team selection.
The Ghanaian FA?
Yeah, the president of the FA getting involved in team selection. It has been reported time and again that with the previous coaches around, there are slots that were reserved for the coach to name 1 or 2 players to make the team. So that is a story that is probably likely to make the headlines alongside the story of the bonuses if it ever happens. But of course, stories to do with the World Cup are stories that we are going to continue to follow and bring to you as the tournament does draw closer. Since now, Africa has 10 teams that will be competing there. But Isma, before the World Cup comes around, we do have our own competitions in the African continent, and one of those is the CAF Champions League. It is in the business end of things, where you do have the semi-finals. The first legs of the semi-finals were played, where RS Berkane defeated Rabat. These are 2 Moroccan teams. 2 goals.
Or the other way around.
Oh, let me just
because be sure. The home side of Rabat.
Yeah, I beg your pardon. Yes, Rabat are leading the tie on aggregates at 2 goals to 0. So RS Berkane will have their work cut out coming to the second semi-final this weekend. But the biggest one of them all involves 4-time champions Esperance, who are taking on Mamelodi Sundowns, last year's finalists and the 2016 champions. The Sundowns, for the first time, went to Tunisia and defeated Esperance 1 goal to 0, and they will be riding on that going into the return leg in Pretoria at this weekend. But maybe the 2 Moroccan teams. Berkane have been very dominant in the CAF Confederations Cup. I think they have won 3 in the last 5 years, and now they are trying to have a shot at the Champions League.
I've not told you of the story. When I was in Rabat in 2019. And I did make contact with Patrick Kado. By then he was playing for RS Berkane, the Uganda Crane striker. And I wanted to go and visit him and also do a story about how life was going I was living in Morocco. And at the time, he told me, you're going to lose an entire day if you choose to come. Eventually, I got to learn it would take me about 5 hours from Rabat to Berkane, so I didn't travel. So I missed the opportunity to go and see RS Berkane. So I've not had the opportunity to go there yet. I've had the chance to go to Tangier, Casablanca, and all these places. One of the things I liked about that first leg between ASFA and RS Berkane was the crowd. The stadium was packed.
It was played at the Prince Abdelmoulay Stadium, the same venue of the AFCON final.
The AFCON final, and eventually the home side did win. But it's far from done. It's far from done. Remember, when they say familiarity breeds contempt, this is where it comes in, because these are 2 teams that would know each other too much for playing league football, playing cup football. They play in the Botola in their league championship in Morocco. They probably have seen players move either side and even staff, so there's so much familiarity. And you'd imagine that is far from done, considering that Berkane will have their second leg at home and will have, if they have the same size of crowd like ASFA had for that first leg, then we're in for a treat.
Yeah, because I'm trying to find out the last time a Moroccan team actually did win this competition, and it's not way back. You'll probably have to go to 2017 when Wydad Casablanca, Wydad Athletic did win the competition. So there's an opportunity for Moroccan team to get into the final. Rabat have never been there. Berkane won it in 1985, but since then they have not returned to the final. They have made a few semi-final appearances here and there, so we'll be waiting to see who advances. But whoever advances will be up against
will be the underdog in the final. Whichever of the Moroccan sides advances will be the underdog
when we are still playing home and away.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but of course, whoever advances will be up against either Mamelodi Sundowns or Esperance. So like we did say, Mamelodi Sundowns are coming into their second leg semi-final with a 1-0 advantage. That goal they scored in Tunisia. Last year, they defeated Esperance in the quarterfinals to make it to the final. This time round, these two teams are meeting in the semi-finals, and Mamelodi are carrying that advantage. But of course, they won't be having Grant Kekana, who was red carded in that one. I also thought they were lucky to leave with victory in Tunisia, much as you think otherwise with that disallowed goal.
Yeah, I felt the goal was rightly disallowed. I thought it was rightly disallowed. But they were lucky in the sense that for considerable spells, Esperance were the better side. They managed the ball much better. But you could also look at the history of Sundowns. They tend to perform very well away from home in the group stages, but I've never really cracked the code consistently in the knockout stages away from home. And as Ugandans, first of all, we are rooting for Dennis Onyango.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, to win a second African title. And that would further cement how great, and we always rank him as one of the greatest Ugandan footballers ever, how great he is if he goes and chokes up a second, even if he's no longer a first choice because Rowan Williams is in goal. But you've got to think that, and you're the one who always keeps the times, when the fixture, the time for kickoff for this one,
4 p.m. which will be 3 p.m. in South Africa.
And that's what Sundowns have always done for this, because they need the fans to come in. So there will be a sea of yellow.
There's a time they played a CAF game at night in South Africa. I don't remember the opponent, and everyone, of course, they were mocking them, but everyone was being shocked that Sundowns can actually play a game at night. So everyone wonders why when they're playing against teams from the north, they play during the day when it is hot.
Actually, initially, I was shocked when I first saw those fixtures that happened at 3 p.m. because I felt Sundowns had thrown away the advantage they would have over North African teams when you choose to play in the hot sun, in the mid-afternoon sun.
Because when they played against Stade Malien, the game kicked off at 8 p.m. South African time.
Yeah, but I've also come to learn that their fans tend to come to games more when they are played earlier than when they are played at night.
No, actually, because even when they play earlier, it is usually by the time the game kicks off, fans are just walking in. People are still at work,
but still the
numbers are in when you get into the second half.
Yeah, but eventually, if the game started at 9 p.m. or let's say 8 p.m. South African time, they tend not to have the kind of numbers. And for me, the challenge Sundowns normally has been for their home fixtures has been about how many people they are able to attract to their games, because they are not Orlando Pirates or Kaizer Chiefs, that are teams that are bred and a bit like Young and Simba, teams that people are born with in their blood, and people tend to go out for their games much more easily. But on the pitch, they have an advantage. Eventually, Coach Cardoso has figured out what to do with this side. When he first came in, there were always doubts, because they brought him particularly, I think, to win this competition.
Yeah, they want to win the Champions League.
They want to win the Champions League again, and it's 10 years since they won their last one. There were doubts about whether he's figured out what to do with Sundowns to get them back to that level when they won the Champions League. And of course, that team was very, very good. The one that won at the time when Kama Billiat was playing some of his best football.
When Dennis Onyango was the best goalkeeper on the continent.
Best goalkeeper on the African continent. It was, and of course, you look at Kekan and all the other guys who are part of that side. They do not have the same kind of names or talent now, but they brought in a coach who is supposed to get these players to that level of 2016, and now he's very close.
They were nearly there last year before losing to Pyramids in the final.
Yeah, but now what does Cardoso do? Because you can't be stuck in two minds. Do they try to preserve their lead, or do they go after Esperance again? If they go after them and then leave spaces, they could be punished, and then they look very silly. Do they close shop? And if they close shop and then concede, then they have to open up.
You want to have this gut feeling that they will try to win that game at home.
They have to find the balance for me.
I don't expect them to be conservative, because I mean, they play to entertain.
Okay, Sundowns
much as you want to win.
Don't know how to be conservative.
So how do you balance both? How do you play to entertain, but you also try to make sure that you're keeping it tight at the backs?
So for me, they have to find the balance. When do they go on the attack? When do they commit players? And then how they transit defensively? Because Esperance at this stage may not have much to lose. If the game is still goalless, then Esperance know that they can easily get a goal at any point. And when they get the goal, then we are back to square one. And they will be thinking, if Sundowns won in Tunisia, so can we. So even they can win in Pretoria. So I think the game is really on a knife edge.
Yeah, but also, Ismail, now this game returns, if you remember their quarterfinal, the one that was played in Pretoria, the one that had lots of violence, where fans turned against each other. At one point, a Sundowns fan actually became hero when he tried to save an Esperance fan who was just holding on to the barriers when he was nearly falling down. So you're also hoping that this time around, probably whoever was responsible then have learned from their mistakes. And they
for the
should,
safety and security of the stadium.
The safety and security of the stadium, but also the fans to behave. Especially the fans from Tunisia and stuff like that, and we should be able to have a game played for 90 minutes or even extra time without any kind of
you really hope that by the time the game is done, everything that is going to be discussed will be about what has happened inside the four lines. Would be very, very unfortunate if the discussion after the game is about anything else but the football. Now you bring back a story of the problems inside the stadium. You hope that nothing like that will happen because the prize is so big, and these days, you know, CAF has increased the prize money. Probably it's one of the things they discuss the most.
There's a lot of money.
There's a lot of money to win.
Football.
Yeah, so everyone should be focusing on what will happen inside the four lines. Hopefully, there's a young defender they brought on after Grant Kekana got sent off. Does not have the same level of experience of the other guys, but if he got out with those minutes playing in Tunisia, should be able to get her. And this is when you call upon the leaders. There are those who lead with their voice, like Onyango, with his experience when he's not on the pitch. I think in terms of what they do during this week to prepare for the game is very important. Then you've got to look at players like Mudau or even Temba Zwane. Even when they are not on the pitch, their voice on what to do in this kind of situations is going to be very, very critical to where Sundowns end up.
From where you're seated, who advances?
I'm very biased. I want Sundowns to go through. I want Sundowns to go through.
You're not alone.
Yeah, I want Sundowns to go through. And then the team they'll find easier to beat in the final from Morocco is the one that should go through.
But I didn't ask. You expect Berkane to overturn the result or Rabat to defend their time?
I expect a very long game. Actually envisage another 2-0 result, then extra time. Then a shootout, which is a coin toss. Like I stated, familiarity breeds contempt. There's nothing to choose between two Moroccan sides that have been going at it for league titles, for the cup and all these other competitions domestically. So that could be a very long night. But in the end, I would want the weaker of the Moroccan sides to go through. So that Onyango wins the champion.
Who's the weak? I think whoever goes through, they should be able to get it over. Sundowns should be able to get it over the line. Though you feel Berkane might probably be a little bit hard for whoever they will be.
Because Berkane, having won the number of Confederations Cup titles they've won in the recent past and playing on the African continent, a lot more consistent and making it very fine in the competition than FAR. You think Berkane will be the tough opponent? Yeah, for anyone who makes it through from the other half of the draw. Well,
that's all the time we had for you. We'll be back next week. And of course, I will be sharing with you our thoughts from the second leg semi-finals that would have been played. And we'll also try to get one African team out of the 10 that is going to the World Cup to focus on, depending on who would have made the headlines. Clive Cheze is my name. I've been in good company of Ismail Dhakaba Kigongo, the head of sports here at Nation Media Group. I'll catch you again in the next video.